There are 52 Sundays in a year, and I'm speaking either here or somewhere 51 of those Sundays, except for the years when I preach 52 times. I'll probably make it 52 more often if I can just find a church in the tropics near a scuba diving location that will let me preach. But on the islands where I go, it's all Catholic churches, and they don't want to hear from me. I keep that schedule not simply because my former spouse liked to say that I do believe that the whole world has a right to my opinion, but because I have a lot that I believe needs to be said on a whole host of social justice situations in the world. And has been true for most comedians in the world, Donald Trump is supplying me with an endless amount of material to talk about. I have no confidence in his claim that he's going to make America great again, but you have to admit he has made Saturday Night Live great again. I was just about done with that, but it is good again. We've never tried to create a topical index to my sermons, and that would be a great project for some enthusiastic volunteer to take on. But I probably come pretty close to hitting 40 different topics out of every 50 sermons. One of the people whose work I really admire and who I'm glad to think of as a friend in his effort to create progressive religious content is Michael Dowd, the author of Thank God for Evolution. Michael's wife, Connie, is both a scientist and kind of an organizer and manager for Michael. Years ago, the two of them decided to give up on having settled careers or even owning a home, and they bought a travel trailer, mobile home, and just travel around the country, devoting themselves to speaking on just one topic, saving the environment. They travel all over, they speak, they do research, and organize events to promote environmental awareness and try to shift our society's priorities and practices towards a more sane and sustainable relationship with the earth. It's not that Michael is indifferent to the other topics that I find to be important to address. He's not indifferent about the problems of poverty, racism, gender discrimination, addiction, domestic violence, the prospects of international warfare. But they have decided that this one topic is so important that that is all they're going to do and all they're going to research and talk about. And Michael's a fireball of energy. He regularly calls me at completely inappropriate late hours of the night, asking me to review lectures or articles or videos he's set to release. And peer review is important and sadly overlooked by a lot of religious writers. So I'll confess that reviewing Michael's work is a priority for me. When he calls and asks for my help, I'm eager to give it to him, and it has been very educational for me. Most of what I know about current research in environmental sciences, I've learned by reviewing his published material. I'm always enriched by getting to see what he's working on. He and Connie both filter through an awful lot of stuff. And Michael, if you are listening, if you would get it to me a couple of weeks before you need it, that would really help a lot. But for Michael and Connie, the world is literally on fire. As Chomsky said in his December address, there has never been a time in human history when this topic was more vital, and we simply don't have time to waste in getting around to doing something about it. Our environment is not just at a tipping point, but in fact, if the human race ceased to exist today, if some cataclysmic virus knocked out all of humanity today, and there was no one left to burn any more coal or oil, the oceans would continue to rise for the next 200 years. No matter how good we get at managing our energy resources, the ocean will rise between 25 to 40 feet over the next 200 years. So you might wonder why Michael and Connie don't just strike off on an Al Gore-styled education mission. But for Michael, staying in the church is important because he sees this as a spiritual issue. Michael started wearing a green clergy shirt with the white collar when he speaks in churches now, and he bills himself as an environmental evangelist. One of the things I've come to see from my interactions with him is that traditional religion really has been part of the problem. Why are we so unwilling to change our ways when we know we are killing our planet and making it uninhabitable? And some of that is because traditional religions have taught people that this world doesn't matter and the world to come is all that we really have to worry about, to the degree that we have a sense that Jesus or somebody will come back before the earth has become completely spoiled. While you find some suggestions of reverence for the earth in the major Western religions, most of what you see is fear of nature and a desire to dominate it. And for us in a capitalist world, domination means getting a profit out of it. What do we have to do to the earth to make money from it? The forms of Christianity, Islam, and Judaism that push relevance off into a transcendent otherworldly life diminish and undermine our efforts to get people to care about what's happening to the earth. Progressive religious thinkers are increasingly willing to stress evidence-based faith rather than maintaining fealty to ancient pre-science texts and belief systems and creeds. We are in a position to change the way that religious people view and treat the earth. But, and here honestly is the hard thing, environmental concerns are the most difficult and challenging of the issues that we face. And a lot of them are quite difficult. You think about why income disparity is so bad, or why our banking system is set up to reward dishonest behavior and to punish honest labor. But really, environmental stuff is so complex, and it's not immediate. It happens slowly. You know, when I say that the oceans are going to rise 25 to 40 feet over the next 200 years, well, most of us here really only have to worry about the next 30 or 40 years. I mean, we're not going to live to see New York and Miami underwater. Our grandchildren will. They'll see it. We won't. But the topic is complex. There's nothing that you can personally do that dramatically changes it. And that makes it boring. It's so hard to keep people's attention. And that's part of why I admire Michael and Connie so much, is they have devoted themselves to speaking on the one topic we most need to hear that most people absolutely shut down and don't want to talk about. 98% of the environmental scientists in the world are in agreement about global climate change, but if the news media mentions it at all, and Counterspin has done studies of how much the corporate media talks about it, and it's typically minutes in the course of a year that the topic comes up, and they will insist on giving what they call a balanced view. That is, legitimate scientists that are talking about climate change and the 2% of scientists that are on the payroll of Enron and Big Coal who say, well, maybe yes, maybe no. It's not a balanced issue. It's a known fact. As I've heard Michael say, though, I drove a car here tonight to tell you about how bad it is to drive cars. One of the most frustrating things to me about religious people is that religion somehow teaches us to be satisfied with symbolic gestures. Religious people will drop to their knees and pray about things when we really need to be using our hands and feet as our prayer, when we really need to be active doing things. We light candles and obsess. We obsess about nuances of language when what is called for is substantive action. People of conscience will turn their thermostats down a couple of degrees in the winter, turn them up a couple of degrees in the summer, when what we really need to be doing is insisting that we get solar panels over all of our interstates, wind turbines on the top of every windy hill in Wisconsin and Kansas and Oklahoma. We will recycle our plastics, aluminum, and paper when, if anyone thinks about it, that truck they drive down the road to pick up your recycling bin does more damage to the environment than you can possibly save by recycling those things. What we need to do is to take substantive action. Rather than have a big truck come to pick up our old newspapers and milk bottles, we need to change how we make milk bottles and paper products. If we made it out of hemp, which is much more renewable than cutting down trees to make paper or using oil to make plastics, and it's biodegradable. It's cheaper, it's better for the environment, and if we could just get some of our pig-headed politicians to understand that growing hemp is not tantamount to making everybody smoke pot, although we ought to legalize that stuff anyway. But regardless of what we did with the buds, the hemp itself could transform what we're doing to the environment with plastics and papers. We keep debating fuel efficiency when we just need to stop using gas in our cars. The nation of Israel tried a very noble experiment. They had Tesla design a car, electric car, with a dropout battery pack so that when you were about to run out of energy, you pulled into a battery station instead of a gas station, dropped out the battery, put in a charged battery, and you went on down the road with just 2 or 3 minute change out of the batteries. And like so many great experiments, it failed because of the financing. They just couldn't sell the idea to people. And if ever there was a country in the world that not only didn't produce its own oil, but didn't have any friends who did. I mean, if Israel can't become free of gas-burning cars, who can? But one day soon, battery technology will be much better than it is right now. But even at the state of technology today, we could change the vehicles that we drive, turn service stations into battery stations, and stop burning gas. We could do it if we just were willing. The free market doesn't always work to help us to do what is in our best interest, especially when it comes to sacrificing profits for long-range environmental accomplishment. This is what we're facing now with a much too business-friendly president who has appointed Scott Pruitt, Oklahoma's former attorney general, to be the director of the EPA. There are very few people in America who have obviously publicly hated the EPA as much as Scott Pruitt, who has sued them several times trying to defend the oil interests in Oklahoma from the management of the EPA. And his plan, they will not just eradicate the EPA. What they will do is fire staff, cut budgets, cut programs, and simply stop enforcing the regulations that have helped to keep our water, air, and land free of pollution. Now, we saw this coming. We saw this shift in values clearly portrayed in the Trump administration's quick approval of the Dakota Transfer Pipelines plan to put a crude oil pipeline under the Missouri River on Standing Rock Sioux land. I predicted that this would happen, but it is happening for purely immediate economic gain. There's no reason to be doing this other than the fact that over the next 3 or 4 years, that will generate a profit for a tiny group of investors. The pipeline will eventually leak because, men and women, pipelines leak. That's what they do. Pipelines leak. There have been more than 800,000 gallons of crude oil spilled in North Dakota in the last 5 years. Pipelines leak. But we are placing a major source of agricultural and drinking water in America at risk for something as venial as short-term profit. In a very few years, that pipeline will be a dinosaur on the landscape because there will be no reason to push crude oil through it. Native American spirituality tends to talk about a 7-generation perspective, that they want people to think about their use of the land and resources over a 7-generation period of time. Even though their primitive technology did not pose anything like the risk of our industrialized era, they knew to treat nature in a way that preserved it for those who would come long after we are dead. The images of the remaining water protectors being removed from Standing Rock Camp at gunpoint this week speaks to what is truly sick about our society, about our view of such things as the land that feeds us, the water we have to drink, and the air we must breathe. Dozens of this generation's most valued spiritual leaders are now in jail this weekend, and they face 5 to 10 years in prison for simply slowing down the construction of this stupid pipeline. And when you see a militarized police pointing their rifles at unarmed water protectors, you realize what it's like when a government is run by corporations. We must not, however, be demoralized or defeated by this absurd abuse of the earth. And folks, we must not placate ourselves with symbolic gestures. Now, we hear feed the poor every week. For years, we fed the unsheltered homeless at Bill's Place. Now we take meals to the victims of domestic abuse at Harmony House. But I want you to hear me say this very, very clearly. Charity is not the solution to poverty. Charity is not it. Charity is a spiritual practice. We participate in charity because it deepens our spiritual awareness and deepens our commitment to radical compassion. But it is not a solution. You cannot solve poverty through charity. What we have to change is the system that creates poverty. There is no justifiable reason in the 21st century for there to be either hunger or homelessness. The problem, as Dorothy Day said, is our acceptance of a stinking, rotten economic system. When we make meals for battered women and frightened children, we're not solving their problem. We're just becoming more aware of how frequently that problem arises in our society. We should be careful about our own carbon footprint. I'm not saying to be indifferent about it. We should try to use less fuel. We should be conscientious about recycling. We should try to shop for locally produced foods and goods. But you have to understand that all those things are symbolic. What we have to have is a systemic change. These are teaching tools, but they are not the solution to any of the problems. The solutions to the big problems are, however, right in front of us. We could, in a matter of weeks, move cargo off of our interstates and onto our railways. We could rebuild our mass transit system that would make transportation more than 100 times more efficient than driving our cars. We can mandate a switch from gas-powered to electric automobiles. We can generate all the power this country can use through wind and solar if we just decide to do it. The technology for renewable energy will improve, but it won't improve until we are committed to using it. The more we make solar panels, the better we get at making solar panels. The more we use wind turbines, the better the technology of wind turbines becomes. But as long as the marketplace makes our decisions for us, we'll just keep cutting down our forests, burning coal and oil, and we will continue to pollute our rivers, foul our air, and spoil our farmland. Now, I'm not ready to write a eulogy for the earth or to give up on the future of the human race. I want the great-great-grandchildren I will not live to see to have clean air, clean water, and a healthy planet in which to live. It is time for us not to give up, but to start working for a resurrection of the world. Not a resurrection to eternal life in heaven, but a resurrection of a sane faith that knows that water is worth more than profit and that our air is not for sale. I am begging you not to either give up or to be satisfied with symbolic gestures. What we need now is a revolution, and we must not be satisfied with anything less than that.
Thank you for watching our videos. We are entirely dependent on the donations of our listeners and members. We hope that you find this content to be important enough to help us to keep offering these videos to the public at no charge by becoming a regular contributor. Please click on the donate button on our website at www.spfccc.org. Thank you for your support of progressive religious programming.